The stem of the glass hadn't even hit the floor before I felt the warm trickle down the side of my face. Red, sticky, shockingly fast. Carly stood there, arms still half raised, her chest heaving like she couldn't believe she'd actually done it. Andy's chair screeched back against the floor, but he didn't move. He just stared at me, at the blood, at his wife. I didn't scream. 30 years in criminal courtrooms had taught me how to stay quiet when it mattered most. Instead, I dabbed the cut gently with the edge of my napkin, set it down, and turned to my son. "Andy," I said, my voice low but unmistakable. "Take her upstairs, now." He jolted, like someone had slapped him awake. Without a word, he guided Carly out of the room. She resisted at first, then slurred something about being treated like dirt in her own family. But she followed. I stood there a moment longer, listening to their footsteps fade. Then I exhaled. In the bathroom mirror, the cut looked worse than it was. Head wounds always bleed. I cleaned it with cold water, ignoring the stinging. My white blouse was ruined. I'd worn it on the day I was sworn into the bench. Tonight it would serve as evidence. Back in the dining room, I collected the shattered glass with gloved hands, sealed the fragments in a sandwich bag. I took photos of the table, the wine-stained carpet, my injury, everything time-stamped and labeled. Then I sat at the kitchen table, ice pressed to my temple, and began outlining my plan. Not for revenge, for order, for accountability. I didn't sleep. At 12:06 a.m., I dialed the number I'd always told others to use, but never had myself. "Miami Police Department," the voice said. "How can I help you?" "I'd like to report an assault," I replied, and reached for the evidence folder. 6 months ago, they said it was just for a little while. A few weeks, maybe 2 months at most, just until the down payment came together. I nodded and said, "Yes, of course, that's what mothers do." But 6 months passed. No house, no savings I ever saw. Just my son and his wife sleeping late, ordering deliveries, and treating my house like some extended stay hotel with maid service. I paid the mortgage, the utilities, the groceries. I cooked, I cleaned, and every Friday night I made dinner like clockwork. It used to be a joy. Friday dinners were my way of keeping the rhythm of family life. Even after Andy married, I'd bake, roast, simmer, set the table with real plates, not the kind you throw away. A bottle of decent red wine, not expensive but never cheap. But Carly came in last night like she already owned the place. She threw her purse on the couch and went straight for the bar. Poured herself 3 fingers of Merlot before even saying hello. Complained about her boss, how he didn't respect her, how he made her rewrite something because she missed details. Then she poured another glass. And another. Andy followed her like a shadow, quiet and nervous, watching me for a sign. I gave him none. He's always been that way. Gentle, eager to please, terrified of conflict. I used to think it was a strength. During dinner, I asked about his work at the clinic. Carly cut him off, rolled her eyes. When I spoke again, she interrupted. Snide remarks, sarcasm, more wine. Then she held out her glass to me like I was the help. I looked her in the eye and said, "I think you've had enough." She froze. And then she threw it. By dawn, the skin above my temple had turned a deep, angry violet. The cut wasn't wide, but it pulsed with every heartbeat, a small reminder of where the line had been crossed. I didn't cry. I didn't apply ice out of instinct. Officer Davis arrived a little before 7, a tall man, maybe mid-50s, with weary eyes and a practiced calm. I led him to the dining room where I'd arranged the glass shards like exhibits. I handed over my photos, the blouse, the medical note I'd written myself after assessing the wound. He flipped through the images in silence. "Do you wish to press charges, ma'am?" "Yes," I said. My voice did not shake. As we sat at the kitchen table completing the report, I heard footsteps overhead. Andy appeared in the doorway, hair tousled, eyes swollen. When he saw the officer, his face collapsed into confusion. "Mom, what's going on?" "Your wife assaulted me," I said, not unkindly. "Officer Davis is here because I made a report." "You called the cops on Carly?" "I called the police on someone who threw a glass at my face." He looked back and forth between us, like trying to rewrite the moment in real time, searching for a version that didn't feel like betrayal. But this wasn't his case to reframe. When we were done, I turned to the officer again. "I'd like to request a temporary restraining order," I said, "effective immediately." He nodded. "I can file the motion today." As he gathered his things, I rose from my seat. There was more I needed to do. By late afternoon, their car was packed. Andy didn't meet my eyes when he came downstairs, a duffel in one hand, Carly's voice trailing behind him in clipped instructions. "We'll be at Patty's for a while," he said, like it was a vacation, not an eviction. I nodded and didn't watch them leave. I waited until the tires rolled down the street, then walked upstairs to the guest room. The door creaked open into air that was half settled, half stripped, boxes gone, drawers empty, the bed unmade, a dent still on one side of the mattress. I opened the closet. Most of Carly's things were gone, her coats, the expensive handbags she claimed were gifts from old jobs. But something else was missing, something she hadn't brought. The brooch. A gold circle set with a single garnet my mother had passed down to me the week I turned 25. I kept it tucked in a small velvet box on the top shelf of the closet. Now the box sat open, the indentation of the pin clear but empty. I didn't rage. I didn't call. I closed the lid, smoothed the fabric, and returned it to the shelf. Downstairs, I picked up my phone and dialed a number I hadn't used in 2 years. "Rick, it's Tammy. I need a favor." Rick Langston had been a detective when I was still on the bench, sharp, quiet, and discreet. He was retired now, but still owed me favors. "I need you to look into someone," I told him. "Her name's Carly Miller," quietly. "I want to know what's under the surface." "I'll get back to you," he said. That night, I changed the locks myself. I'd always believed in knowing how to protect what was mine. I cooked a small dinner just for one, nothing elaborate, set one plate at the head of the table, used the crystal water glass, its twin long since shattered. I didn't turn on the TV. I ate in silence, and for the first time in 6 months, that silence didn't feel hostile. It felt like mine. And then the report came in. Rick didn't call first. He just showed up at my door the next morning with a folder under his arm and a look I knew too well, heavy, cautious. "I figured you'd want to see this in person," he said. We sat at the kitchen table, the same place I'd filed restraining orders, signed verdicts, and poured wine before it was weaponized. He slid the folder toward me without a word. I opened it. The first page was a termination letter. Carly had been fired 3 months ago from the firm she still complained about at dinner, insubordination and performance concerns. The signature wasn't even recent. Then came the credit card statements, 5 in total, all maxed. 2 of them under Andy's name, opened with forged details or a manipulated power of attorney Rick couldn't yet confirm. Purchases at jewelry stores, hotel charges, and wire transfers to accounts we didn't recognize. I flipped the page. Retirement account logs, 3 large withdrawals, nearly $400,000 drained. My son's future disappearing in chunks he never authorized. And then the screenshots, social media messages, Carly casually chatting with a friend. "Won't be long now," one read. "Once the old lady bites the dust, we're set. Andy thinks we're saving. LOL. Something tightened in my chest. I pressed the folder closed. "She's not just angry," I said. "She's dangerous." Rick nodded. "This is premeditated, Tammy, and if those retirement withdrawals were unauthorized, we're looking at real charges." I took the folder upstairs to my study and laid out the documents across the desk like puzzle pieces. Evidence tags weren't necessary this time. I knew what I was seeing. She was stealing from him, and she was planning for my death. I opened a new binder and labeled it Case Carly. For years, I'd built arguments to protect victims I'd never met. This time, it was my son. This time, it was personal. I didn't call Andy that day. I needed more facts, not feelings. He wouldn't believe me yet. But the next step had already begun. I sent Rick after the missing money. I chose a quiet coffee shop halfway between my house and the small apartment where Andy and Carly were staying. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions, where conversations got lost in the hum of the espresso machine. When Andy walked in, I saw him before he saw me. He looked thinner. And the turtleneck, high, tight, absurd for late June, told me everything before he even sat down. "Mom," he said softly, sliding into the booth, "you didn't have to call me here." I placed the folder on the table and turned it toward him. I did. He hesitated, then opened it. His hands started shaking halfway through the first set of statements. By the time he reached the screenshots, they trembled outright. This can't be right," he whispered. "She wouldn't do this." I said nothing. Years of silence in courtrooms had taught me when to let truth speak for itself. His eyes darted across the pages, withdrawals, cards, fake signatures, words she'd typed about me dying. "She said we were saving," he murmured. "She said we'd be okay if I just stopped worrying so much." "Andy," I said, my voice steady, "look at me." He didn't. His hand went to his collar, pulling it higher. "After the hearing," he said quietly, "she lost control. She threw my phone, said I made her look like a criminal. She said I chose you over her." I reached across the table and touched his wrist. "Show me." He froze, then pulled the fabric down just far enough for me to see the yellowed edges of a fading bruise near his throat. Small, finger-shaped. My breath caught, but I kept my tone even. "You're coming home." He didn't answer right away, just stared at the empty coffee cup between us, as if the act of agreeing would make it all real. When he finally nodded, his voice was barely audible. "She'll be furious." "I know," I said. "That's why we're leaving before she finds out." And by nightfall, his old room was waiting. I made his bed the way I used to when he came home from college. Tight corners, a spare blanket folded at the foot, and a small glass of water on the nightstand. The windows were cracked open, letting in air that didn't feel heavy anymore. He didn't say much when we got home, just looked around the room like it was a memory made solid again, and then sat down slowly on the couch in the living room, phone clutched in his hand. Carly had called 8 times before we'd even unpacked his bag. He stared at the screen, unmoving. Then he typed a single sentence and hit send. "I need time, I'm safe." After that, he turned the phone face down. I double-checked the front door, then the back, then the garage. Old habits. Around 10, I was upstairs folding towels when the first bang hit the door. "Andy!" Her voice, sharp and slurred, cut through the quiet. "Open this damn door!" Andy froze on the stairs. I walked down and met him halfway. "Stay back," I said softly, taking the phone out of my pocket. The second bang was louder. I could hear her now, alternating between pleading and shouting. "I just want to talk. You think you can hide from me?" I gave our address to the dispatcher and explained she was violating a court order. The officer arrived 7 minutes later. Andy stood behind this front window curtain, silent. Carly was still pacing on the porch, yelling, when the cruiser pulled up. The moment she saw them, her voice pitched into rage. "This is your mother, isn't it?" she shouted. "She called you a coward, and now she's hiding behind cops." They cuffed her quietly. Andy didn't speak as he watched. He didn't flinch, just stood there like a shadow pressed to glass. After they left, I turned the locks once, then twice. Andy sat back down on the couch and stared into the dark, not moving, not sleeping, just breathing like it hurt. Rick came by again 2 days later, his face drawn tight with something heavier than bad news. He set another folder on the kitchen table and didn't sit until I nodded. "You should see this before it hits the system," he said. "It's not the first time she's done it." Inside were copies of court filings from 2 different states. Atlanta 5 years ago, Dallas 3. Same woman, same story. Domestic abuse complaints, financial theft, settlements that vanished into sealed agreements. Each time she'd moved on within months. Each time she found another man with a steady income and a gentle disposition. Each time she left him, broke and quiet. Andy sat across from me, scanning the papers. His fingers traced the black lines of redacted names as though touching them might make it less real. "She never loved me," he said, barely audible. "No," I answered. "She targeted you." He looked up then, eyes rimmed red but dry. "I thought I was saving her. She said she just needed someone to believe in her." "That's what people like her do," I said. "They use the language of need until you forget your own." He exhaled shakily and closed the folder. "So what now?" "We stop letting her write the story," I said. "We start our own." That afternoon, we met with Rebecca Clean, a family law attorney I'd worked with years ago. She was brisk, competent, the kind of woman who'd seen every flavor of deception and didn't flinch. Andy told her everything. She took notes, interrupting only to ask for dates and signatures. By the end of the meeting, we'd filed for divorce and initiated charges for financial fraud. As we left her office, Andy's shoulders seemed to drop an inch, as if the weight had shifted, not gone, but finally shared. Outside, the sun hit his face, and he squinted, unused to brightness after so many dim rooms. That evening, we sat at home in near silence, papers signed and filed, evidence stored. He didn't eat much, but he stayed at the table beside me. The next day would bring court again. The courtroom felt colder than I remembered, though I'd stood in hundreds just like it. This time I sat behind the plaintiff's table instead of presiding from the bench. Andy was beside me, quiet but composed. Carly sat across the aisle with her lawyer, her expression vacant until the judge entered. Then came the part I'd waited for. She stood and entered a plea, guilty on all counts: assault, fraud, violation of a protective order. Her attorney negotiated a deal: 2 years in prison, 3 years of probation, and a permanent no-contact order for both me and Andy. When the judge asked if she had anything to say, Carly turned toward us. Her voice cracked as she muttered an apology. Something about pressure, stress, never meaning to hurt anyone. Andy didn't flinch. He didn't nod. He didn't speak. He just looked straight ahead until it was over. Later, as we walked to the parking garage, he broke the silence. "I want to repaint the room," he said. "Start over." "Any color you want," I replied. He picked sky blue, said it felt like breathing again. That weekend, we pulled everything out of the guest room. Old sheets, lamps, curtains. All of it went. Andy handled the rollers while I taped the corners. By Sunday afternoon, the walls looked like something entirely new. Clean, cool, and quiet. He started therapy the next week. Twice a week at first, then once. He came home flushed but steadier. He slept through the night. Eventually, he returned to work at the clinic part-time, at first easing back into routine like a man testing shallow water. I went back to my garden. The soil was dry from months of neglect, but the roots were still there. I liked the way my hands felt in the dirt, useful, grounded, alive. One evening, I caught Andy staring out the kitchen window, watching birds land along the fence line. "It's weird," he said. "It finally feels like home again." He wasn't wrong. And in the days that followed, he told me he'd been writing something. The mornings settled into something soft again. I'd wake early, make tea, and read by the window while the sun cut slow lines across the floor. Andy's days began later. He spent his evenings recording, researching, editing. His podcast, once just a trial project, had found its audience. He didn't name Carly. He didn't have to. He spoke of patterns, silence, fear that wears a familiar face. He interviewed counselors, survivors, even a retired detective, Rick. I listened to every episode, always quietly, sometimes twice. One afternoon in early spring, Andy came into the kitchen holding a letter. It had the weight of something official. "They're offering a grant," he said, eyes wide. "Enough to build out a whole program, outreach, support, workshops." I smiled and set my book aside. "You'll need a name for it." "I already have one," he said. "The glass that woke me up." When the day of the launch arrived, we took the same car. He wore a dark shirt and no tie, still unsure how to dress for something that mattered this much. I sat in the front row of the community center auditorium, hands folded in my lap. He stepped onto the stage alone, no notes in hand. He spoke clearly about what it means to question your own instincts, to love someone who scares you, to lose your sense of home inside your own walls, about what happens when someone finally sees you and doesn't look away. He didn't look at me while he spoke, but I saw the shift in his shoulders when his voice steadied. Afterward, people approached him with quiet stories of their own. He listened the same way I used to, attentive, careful, open. Not as someone collecting details for judgment, but as someone offering space. That night back home, we didn't say much. He made tea. I washed the mugs. No ceremony, just calm. Before bed, I passed by his door and paused. He'd left it slightly open, the light still on. From within, I heard him humming, soft, low, and sure. For the first time in years, I didn't feel like the house was echoing. It was breathing. Weeks turned into months. Life regained a rhythm. Not the same as before, but something honest. Andy's laughter came easier, the kind that didn't sound like apology. The garden bloomed again. Sometimes, I'd find him out there watering the lilies, barefoot, lost in thought. He'd wave when he noticed me, and I'd wave back, the air between us full of quiet understanding. I still kept the folder, Case Carly, locked in the study cabinet. Not out of bitterness, but as a record of survival. The law had always been about truth to me, but now it felt different. It felt human. One morning, I received a letter from the correctional facility. It was from Carly. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the counter, went for a walk, made coffee, trimmed the basil. When I finally sat down, I opened it. Her handwriting was uneven, shaky. She said she was sorry, that she was in therapy, that she understood now what she'd done. She claimed she wanted to make amends when her sentence was over. I folded the letter neatly and placed it back in the envelope. Then I locked it away in the same cabinet as the case file. Some wounds heal best without reopening. That evening, Andy came home early, holding takeout from the Thai place we used to visit years ago. We sat at the table, laughed about old times, argued gently over the spice level. At one point, he looked up and said, "You know, if you hadn't done what you did that night, I'd still be there. I'd still think love meant forgiveness." I met his gaze. Sometimes it does, but only after accountability. He smiled, small, quiet, genuine. After dinner, he disappeared upstairs for a while, and when he came back down, he handed me a small box. "Open it," he said. Inside was the garnet brooch, polished, restored, its gold band repaired where it had once been bent. "How?" I started. "Pawn shop in Little Havana," he said softly. "Rick tracked it down. Thought you should have it back." The room blurred for a moment. I brushed my thumb across the stone surface, warm under the light. "Thank you," I whispered. He nodded. "For everything." That night, when I placed the brooch back in its velvet box, I didn't hide it away. I set it on the dresser, where morning light would catch it. Justice, I'd learned, doesn't always come in court. Sometimes it comes quietly, over tea, over laughter, over the simple act of breathing freely again. The world outside went on as it always did, messy, loud, unpredictable, but within those walls there was peace. And peace after everything was enough.